Hey guys, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about sedimentary rock. Now, we've been talking about sedimentary rock for basically the last month or two, but I want to make sure we're starting to talk about how it's actually formed. So, how is shale and how is sandstone formed? All right, so we need to make sure that we go ahead and review. We've learned that in order for us to make sand, silt, or clay, which is our basis for our sedimentary rock, we need to make sure we understand that it has to be weathered. So it has to be either physically weathered.
Daddy.
Yeah, it has to be physically weathered or chemically weathered. But the other thing that needs to make sure that we understand is it has to be eroded by wind or water. So moved away to a location, and then it has to be deposited. So you may ask yourself, I know this already, so how does it turn into the rock? Let's get started. It all comes down to making sure that there's three processes. So we have to make sure we understand. So it comes down to three processes. We have to make sure we understand that, first of all, the sediment has to be deposited. So it has to go ahead and find its location, its resting spot. And oftentimes this happens in a basin. Not always, but we're going to go ahead and start talking about how if it happens in a basin. So here we have a basin like an ocean or a lake, and the sediment gets deposited into that ocean or that lake. Then over time, it gets compacted and then cemented together. And that's the process of how to make sedimentary rock. So sand being deposited, you'll see there's lots of space between the sand after it's been put into a basin. Our next step is compaction. And most of you have kind of played most likely in a sandbox before. So you have the idea of what compaction is. And so it can be oftentimes when we're talking about making sedimentary rock, it's other layers putting pressure on top of it. So it would be like, for example, a sand layer formed, and then all of a sudden another layer is starting to form over a long period of time. That next layer on top of it starts to press it down, and it causes the particles to move closer together. So here is an example of a picture where you start to see compaction. There's not as much space in between those particles. And so that's a step that has to occur in order for us to make sandstone, shale. The last step we're talking about is cementation. And you've seen cementation before. When you're going ahead and looking at the outside of our school building, you'll see that the bricks are cemented together with a type of mortar. It's a type of glue. And so we need to make sure we understand that that water, in order for this to occur, water travels through the soil or travels through the particles and oftentimes dissolves certain minerals. So, for example, it could dissolve calcium carbonate, and that acts like a glue to go ahead and form calcite. Calcite is like a glue. But there's other types of glue. Sodium silicate is another type of glue. You can even have iron oxide. So if there's iron dissolved in water, it'll form iron oxide, and that will act like a glue. And so this glue will then go ahead and cement the particles together. What this is a picture of is you can see that the dark shaded part is the actual glue. So the sand is surrounded by the glue mixture. And then that goes ahead, and as it starts to go ahead and dry, you'll start to see, and the water starts to evaporate, then we start to actually have that space filled in with the glue. And that space that's filled in the glue helps kind of create that last step, which is a sandstone.
Mom.
So the one thing I want to make sure we understand, though, is it's not a one-size-fits-all. I want to make sure you understand it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Mom,
So
what's that?
it's a picture. So one of the things I want to make sure we are clear is that sandstone really is formed by cementation. That if you just go ahead and compact sand, it's not going to make the sandstone. No matter how much force you go ahead and put on that sand, it's not going to necessarily go ahead and stick together. That cementation is extremely important. With shale, it's a matter of that compaction, that putting those clay particles together or silt particles together to go ahead and make the actual shale rock. So I want to make sure we understand that it's not a one-size-fits-all, that there's sometimes one process that's more important than the other when you're forming that type of rock. So here's a picture of, we have the clay and silt that's suspended in water. So we're getting ready to go ahead and make shale. So this would be like, for example, in a wetland area or in a marsh, you have lots of clay and silt, or even more, we could be talking about a delta where we have lots of clay and silt. They're suspended in the water. And as it starts to go ahead and deposit and start to go ahead and get piled on top of one another, it starts to go ahead and compact them. And so the space gets smaller and smaller between those particles. And that's where we go ahead and make that shale. Now there is a glue in shale, but that glue, because of the fact that the spaces are so small, there's very little glue or cementation that's actually occurring in this case. So compaction is more important in making of shale. That's the steps. So let's kind of quickly review. We have weathering that has to occur to make those sediment particles. We have to have erosion that occurs. And we have to have deposition that occurs. And then once you have those things that start to occur, then we have to have compaction, which is going ahead and putting pressure on the sediment from above layers. And then we also have to have cementation. That's the process that you need to make sure you remember for class. See you later.